what we've done is we've set up a model shower enclosure for us to be able to film this video. And we've set this up just how it would be out in the field on a regular shower installation. We normally prefer there to be plywood behind all of the cement board. On this we have 1/2 inch plywood, and then we have 1/4 inch hardy backer over that. You can use 1/2 inch hardy backer, or you could even use Durarock or Wonderboard if you want for your cement board. Pretty much we like to bed that cement board in a thin set mortar, a good polymer modified one that'll stick good to the plywood underneath is perfect. And then we've bedded this cement board and used Durarock or cement board screws throughout. These are screws that have a little larger head than normal, and they also have an epoxy coating on them to resist rusting. We have a maximum of about 12 inches in the field and 6 to 9 inches on the edges of our cement board, so it's fastened down securely so it won't move, reducing the potential for any kind of hairline cracks down the road. The first thing we'll do is show you the Metal Lath that goes into the bottom of the shower, including how we would set up the drains and the slopes. We have this set up both for a curbless side to the shower where it would just slope to no curb and then out to the finished floor. And then we have a curb side to our shower model where we will show you how we would create the slopes for that curb. We're going to demonstrate for you how we would pre-fill and deal with any voids and cracks and joints in the Durarock. And then we're going to show you how we would do our waterproofing, then our coat to bury that waterproofing, and then our finish installation over the top of our substrate base coat. The first thing I need to do to prepare myself for reinforcing the corners is to do a mix and then pre-fill any big joints. And for our mix, what we're going to be using is the Milestone base coat mix, and I'll estimate about what I think it's going to take us to do this, which we can always mix a little more, and we'll be able to use this in our base later on if we have a little extra. And this is our Milestone Acrylic Admixture, and I'm going to just estimate how much of that to add. I'm really going to add enough till the viscosity is the right thickness I want to work with. So I'll just be eyeing my mix. And as you're working with this, if it starts to thicken up a little, you can always thin it back down. If you get it too thin as you're doing it, you can always add a little more of the base coat powder to it. And for such a small amount, I'm just going to hand mix it. If we had large quantities, I would probably use a power mixer to do it. I'll kind of show you the viscosity. Now I'm a little thicker than I'm going to be because I'm going to be pre-filling the voids first. Then I'll thin it down just a touch for doing the bedding the mesh. You want to make sure it gets in and makes good contact with the existing surfaces, and you can even just kind of push it in by hand if you want, but it's important that it saturates those surfaces for a good bond. And I'm just going to kind of clean it down pretty tight to where I want it to be. And you can, if it's not a big gap, you can let it fill as you mesh it. But these bigger ones, I think we need to pre-fill. Now you could go around to the whole shower if you have a big installation and pre-do this. It doesn't have to be the same day. It can be the day before, however you want to do it. You could go in and just get all of your pre-fills done. If you have wide gaps in your joint where the cement board comes together, you could pre-fill those at this time. If it's just a narrow gap like we have here, you don't need to pre-fill it. You can fill it at time of doing your fiberglass reinforcing cloth. So the next thing I'm going to do is thin my mix a little bit because it's a little thick for this step, for how I like it. And I'll show you the viscosity as I pour it into my tray here. You can kind of get a feel for it. It flows, but it's not watery. Okay? I like to, for bedding my tape, I like to work with a mud tray and a Bondo squeegee. I like the Bondo squeegees because I believe they do a good job of not tearing the fibers in the reinforcing fabric as you do it. I'm going to just kind of set this here. My usual way of liking to do this is to kind of pin one side down, and I'm forcing the mixture through the cloth and onto the cement board. And I will almost always try to work one side and then pull my way around to the other side and stretch the cloth into place. You don't want to get too much of a buildup. You want to try to keep it just as thin as you can so that you don't get have to add a whole bunch to make your corners come out straight for yourself. It's nice to work it from one end to the other. I'll kind of show you how I get it to fasten down now. I kind of gently hold it in place with my hand as I do this particular task. It's nice to work from one end to the other, the middle to both ends, to avoid any kind of bubbles and extra material that tends to develop as you go. Continue to stretch the fabric as you go. This really is where the Bondo squeegee is kind of important, because if you were using a putty knife, especially a sharp one, it would have a tendency to kind of cut it in the corners, whereas with a Bondo squeegee, because it's plastic, you don't have to worry about that so much. And you could have your fiberglass cloth kind of tacked up for yourself, or you can just sort of work it like I'm doing in place as you go. Look it over, make sure that it's all filled everywhere. Kind of helps to let it take on and then come back over it. And that's our first step in preparing for our waterproofing membrane on the walls. The next thing I'd like to show you is how we do the bottom of the shower. This is a typical shower drain, and they're set up as a split drain. So we'll do our slopes out of this point to the drain. Then the waterproofings will go in on top of this. And then the top half of the drain will be installed. And you can adjust the height of this before you do your top part. And then create your slopes down into your finished drain eventually. But our next step for us is going to be to do our Metal Lath in the bottom of the shower. And I've pre-cut some Metal Lath for us. And I appreciate it to fit with our shower stall here. Have a little handle down a little bit. Fasten it down with the same screws that we used in the Durarock. I'm going to fasten the drain down around the perimeter with a few screws, and I'm going to try to get them to sort of catch right on the edge of my lip. They don't actually have a way for this to screw through it. I don't like to really put a screw right in it, so I'm going to put them around the perimeter. Now they make these in varying qualities. You can get literally cast bronze drains for showers. This one is a pretty inexpensive one that is plastic ABS for glue-in. I'm setting this up as if there were a floor out here, and this just is a slope, so there's no curb on this side. And I'm going to go ahead and trim my Metal Lath off just at the edge of my project here. want to make sure you wear gloves when you work with the Metal Lath. It is really quite sharp on the points. One more piece for the end here. I want to point out that we've done a seam, and we did our seam out here where it won't be in a corner. You wouldn't want to do a seam in the middle of a corner because you want your reinforcing to go across those. And so we're reinforcing on the center of our threshold. If you wanted to, you could overlap, but we tend not to overlap because that forces us to do build-up that you wouldn't have to do otherwise. Now I've brought it up the wall enough to get a little bit of reinforcement in the corners, but at the same time, I haven't brought it up so much that I'm going to have to deal with bringing the whole wall out to bury it. So this will be in my covered and buried by my slopes and my shower pan. Okay, I've been using a couple of different types of screws. This first one is a Metal Lath screw. That's like a 3/4 inch one. And I have an 1.5 inch Metal Lath screw. They come in varying sizes. I have an 1.25 inch cement board screw. I like these because of the large head. It allows me to be able to put it anywhere in the Metal Lath and it won't pull through. It doesn't matter which one you use. Sometimes I use the short one if I know I'm just going through one layer of plywood. If I think I'm going through the Metal Lath and into the stud behind it, I'm going to want the longer one, like 1.25 inches or even 1.5 inches if necessary. Okay, now I'm going to take the top part of the drain off and just set it aside for right now. I want to check how far it is from the edge of my drain to the corner, and it's about 2 feet, just a little bit under. So I want to do about 1/4 inch to the foot of slope from this, and that would be measured up off of the plywood. Since the edge of the rim of my drain is already about 1/4 inch up, I want to go another 1/4 and another 1/4. So I want to be about 3/4 inch total up in the corner. I'm going to take a piece of tape, mark each corner as I do this. It doesn't have to be super accurate right now. Once we've plastered this layer in there, then we'll put the top half of the drain in and do a more detailed slope out of that. But I want to show you that even though this area right here is only under 1 foot away from the edge, we still stay with a nice level line around the perimeter for our slopes. So we'll be, if we're up 3/4 from the plywood and the longest point, then we'll be up 3/4 all the way around the perimeter. And now we have our filler coat mixed, and I just kind of want to show you the viscosity of this. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start scooping it in. Now I want to make sure it flows through and it's penetrated, and this mix is pretty thin, so it's going to flow through pretty easy for me. I still want to make sure that I've pushed it through everywhere and that I have good penetration of my Metal Lath. Right around the drain, I'm trying to make sure it's really in there nice and tight. Pretty good idea. Kind of plaster this wall up here and make sure it's finished pretty good. actually calculated the height on this front wall here to be about the right height. Show you. It'll end up being about the right height for slope up out of the finished drain. And so I don't need to worry too much as long as I've got obvious slope to my drain and I'm a little lower than that. I know that I'm at a good height. And the acrylics make our cement mix rather sticky, so it pulls with the trowel. So it takes a little finesse to kind of lay it down neatly. But we're not trying to get it perfect right now, because after it takes up a little bit, we're going to come back and carve it in a little bit more and kind of clean up our slopes a little bit. So as long as I have enough material in there and have some obvious slope to it, I'll be okay when I come to my next step. And there you have it, our base that we'll shape once it takes up. Okay, it's been about 2 hours since we put the coat in the bottom of the shower pan here. We're going to go through and just kind of straighten all of our edges up, scrape it and sand it as is needed to finish it out. And I use regular sandpaper. I buy the full-size sheet and rip it in half, and then I just stretch a half a sheet onto my sanding pad. I usually like one edge to be right on the edge of the sanding pad. And this is 80 grit sandpaper on this particular sander. It's about the right size aggregate on the paper. It could go a little rougher. Now I'm going to just go around and lightly hit everywhere. If you're in a closed space and you're sanding on any kind of dry material, you want to wear a respirator so I can communicate. I'm going to leave my respirator off, and we don't have too much dry to sand. The wet, if you sand on it, it doesn't become airborne in quite the same way. You can see how easily it shapes at this point. I can take high spots and kind of pull them down a little bit. Make sure that I check myself and that I have nothing too high in there, so that I know I have it shaped off good. Okay, I have my slopes all pretty set for myself. I'm going to clean it up a little bit. We'll pull the rag out of the drain. We'll just kind of make sure we clean and don't let any of our waste go down the drain. Keep that in there. You don't want to plug your drain up. Now I'm going to go ahead and set up to do one more coat of our filler mix over the entire thing. That'll help me to bury any of the screw heads that stand proud, kind of feather in on my Metal Lath. Some of my areas of my Metal Lath are a little rough for being able to do the RedGard yet, so I'm going to go ahead and just coat everything out with one thin coat. Really letting the aggregate determine the thickness that it goes on. And I'm just going to do all my walls first. Do my floor. And the object is I just want to get enough on there so that I can get a nice smooth coat for my waterproofing membrane to go over. I'm using the fill coat mix because that's a little larger aggregate size, which is just going to give us a little better bond of our RedGard waterproofing coat. I'm going to kind of do all my curves at the same time. I can start creating a little bit of a back slope on this if I want at this time, where it slopes back towards the shower, but then the water gets on there down the road, will flow into the shower as opposed to out on the floor. Sure, I get a nice coat on it. The object is to try to lay enough on top so that I can come back later and sand it a little and get it nice and straight that way. I'm just going to put a little on the center edge. And I'm going to just go over my floor one more time with just thin coat just to give it a nice smooth surface for the RedGard to bond to go over. Adjust my slope just a little if I need to. Slope to your areas, it can be helpful to have a little shorter trowel. So use this one. So I can get a smooth coat without having to over sand too much. Just kind of anything like this where it's a little bit rough. Just a little bit more mix there. Okay, now we were just about to do a light sanding on the walls to smooth it out a little bit. I wanted to kind of point at this here. You can see where it started to dry a little bit. That's how you can tell it's time to do any sanding and kind of shaping. If you wait for it to be totally dry, it will be very hard to sand. But at this point, it should carve quite easily. So I'll just kind of lightly go over it. Continue to shape it. You can see that the mud is not building up on my sandpaper. I've sanded all the walls already. And it just, you can see the whiteness from it, but there's no buildup of plaster on it. And I've got it now, so it's about the right timing for coming back and scraping the bottom of my shower pan. So I just kind of work my way around. I'm gonna just use a small trowel so I can deal with the different angles pointed towards the drain, then I'll finish with the big. My goal here is to make sure I have good slope and then it's reasonably flat without any voids for the RedGard waterproofing to be able to bond on. Again, I want to point out how easily this carves at the right point in time. And I always keep my scraper angled to the slope. So here it starts to get a little too long, so I switch to 12-inch. Then I'll kind of check my threshold. Make sure that's like I want it. Now I have different length straight edges for me. I can even, I like the aluminum because it kind of marks onto the cement, the high spots, and then I can come back with my patch here, knock off the dark spot, kind of know if I'm pretty straight. Can actually look under it, use it for carving a little bit. Very nice to be able to have a straight edge like this, a level that you can scrape with. Works quite nicely on flat floors, of course with this much angle. You can kind of get a sense of the angle as I put the level in there. I'll try to get you a shot with, shows the actual slope. So the level, and I kind of pitch this up. You can see where I'm a little over a 1/2 inch of slope, and I can do this from any corner, and that's about right for this base. And that's what you want, is a definite slope so that you're not going to have water sitting anywhere on the slab. The only thing I really want to do at this point is make sure I clean this flange out good. for bonding my RedGard onto that. And I still have my cloth plug in there so I don't get it all down the drain. You can vacuum the drain out a little if you need to. We can set this a little bit later.